All right, I want to tell you guys about something. It's about a guy. He was a college athlete, Division One. You know, this kind of person who never really had to think about being in shape, because, being in shape it's who he was, right? It was built into his identity. His schedule always supported it. His environment always supported it. Then he graduates, right? He gets a job, falls in love, builds a career, and starts to build a family, right? Got kids on the way, has kids. Now, somewhere in the middle of all this time, and I think it's maybe important that we realize it wasn't some single dramatic moment. It wasn't an injury. It wasn't a breakdown. But his identity just began to drift a bit. When I met him, he was 44 years old. He couldn't do pull-ups. He got winded climbing stairs. He's probably 40, 45 pounds overweight compared to where he'd been at his best. And the thing that I think haunted him the most, it wasn't just that he was out of shape, and it wasn't that he didn't recognize the guy he saw in the mirror in front of him. It was that he had no real idea how it happened. I call this something. I do. I've named it so it makes it easier to grab onto. And what it is we just call it the default. And what I mean by that is it's not really laziness, it's not weakness. I don't want us to think of it as a lack of discipline. I like the default to be, it's a little more insidious than that, to be perfectly honest, than any of those things whatsoever. It's what takes over when the external structures that were holding our standards in place disappear. Now, I want you to go into your mind's eye, and I want you to think about the periods in your life when you were at your best. Physically. When you were crushing it. Really sit back and think about it. I'm willing to bet that there was probably a structure around you. Maybe it was a team. Maybe it was a season, a unit if you were in the military, a training partner, a coach, some kind of schedule that demanded something of you, whether you felt like it or not, right? It's not that you were just disciplined, right? Because you were. The military, it held me to a standard that I didn't have to manufacture every single morning. It was embedded in the environment. It was embedded in the uniform, the formation, the accountability of the people and the soldiers standing next to you. Now, when I transitioned out, I didn't lose my values. I didn't lose my work ethic. But what happened was I lost the structure that had been enforcing both of those things, right? And I didn't even really notice it at first. That thing, that criminal, we call that the default. Now, it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like failure in the moment. It feels like, I'm gonna skip a workout this morning. Maybe just take this one reasonable compromise. Or 1 week, everything got super busy and our workouts didn't happen. And I maybe ate a little crazy because I was on the road. And then that 1 week becomes 2 weeks. Then that 2 weeks becomes a month. And then you look up and it's been 3, 4, 5 years down the road, right? Now, that's the default. That's what we're speaking of. Now, it wins through 3 mechanisms, and this is where it gets a little down and dirty, right? The cool part, though, is once you recognize these 3 mechanisms, you can't unsee them, right? The first one is, we talked about it a little bit, it's the removal of external accountability. So when nobody is checking, most people gradually stop checking on themselves. Now, it's not out of laziness. It's out of the simple reality that willpower it's a finite resource. And if we spend most of it on things that feel more urgent, then it's hard to get that workout in. Now, the job demands it, the family demands it, the crisis of the week demands it, and somewhere at the bottom, down low, the bottom of that priority stack is the version of you that you keep meaning to get back to, right? The second is how we'll call it the identity drift. Now, this one's slower, it's a little bit quieter, and it's more damaging, I think, than the first. When you were at your best physically, that wasn't just a body. That was an identity. You thought of yourself as someone who trained, someone who competed, someone who showed up, someone with a standard that they held. And you're probably pretty proud of it. Now, when that behavior stops, the identity doesn't update overnight. It doesn't change. It lingers. You still think of yourself as that person for a while, but then gradually, without you even maybe consciously deciding it, that story begins to shift. We use words like, I used to be athletic. And then the present tense becomes, I'm not really in shape now. And somewhere in between those two sentences of, I used to be athletic and I'm no longer in shape, you stopped expecting yourself to be athletic. That's identity drift. And I think it's the most dangerous part of the default because it's the hardest to change, it's the hardest to reverse. Now, the third is what we're going to call normalization, and that's the gap between who you were and who you are right now stops feeling like a gap anymore, and it starts feeling like reality. Your current baseline becomes the new normal, and once something's normal, it stops creating any kind of urgency. This is why people can know intellectually that they need to change something, but still not change, because the discomfort has become familiar, and the familiar feels fine. And the truth is, it's not fine, right? And I don't want to shame anyone. I say it because the first step out of the default actually is recognizing what feels normal isn't necessarily true. Now, we're going to talk about the moment of recognition. And it's usually a moment that comes on, and it's not really, often I find, it's not really a gradual realization. It's a specific moment, right? For some people, it's a photograph that they see themselves at a family reunion or some kind of event, and it hits them so much harder than looking in the mirror does, right? The mirror hides things for years that a photograph will open expose in one moment in time, right? For others, it's a doctor's physical, or that appointment they're going to make, and the numbers on the chart are going to still tell a story that you're not prepared to hear. And then for some other people, it's watching their kids do something athletic, and that feeling and understanding the distance between who they are now and the parent that they wish they could be, with that kid. And even for some, I guess it's a little even quieter than that. It might just be a morning where you wake up and the weight of the gap is suddenly too heavy to keep ignoring. I've sat across from hundreds of people that had experienced those moments. And here's what I know. We shouldn't think of this moment as a crisis. We should think of it as an opening, right? The default survives on unawareness. And the second that you see it clearly, the second that you can name it, understand how it works, and decide that you're done cooperating with it, its power begins to break down. And it's not motivation. Like I've said before, motivation is temporary. It's simply, you got to use it as a decision. And decisions, unlike motivations, they don't expire, right? So what reclamation really is, and the whole point of my coaching practice and how I go about it, and I think I'm making sure perfectly clear, is that reclamation is not really going back, because you cannot be 23 years old again. You cannot undo the years or the injuries or the choices you've made, and honestly, you shouldn't want to. You should cherish the life that you lived. But what you can do is close that gap between the standard you've quietly accepted and the standard that you actually wish to hold yourself to when you're being honest. That's a different project than most fitness programs are selling. Most of them are going to sell you a destination, a number on a scale, a before and after photo. I'm not just interested in destinations. I'm really interested in you becoming, in the process of rebuilding your standard, become that person, the one who decided to stop cooperating with the default, the one person who shows up differently and better in every area of their life, not just in the gym, but at work, in relationships, in the way you carry yourself, in the expectations that you set for you and the people around you, right? The body and the physical nature of it, it's the starting point, but it can't be the finish line. So, in closing today, here's this week's standard. Very, very simple. The default is not really your fault, but staying there is a choice. Every person I've ever worked with had that moment where they decided they were done making that poor choice. This show, what I'm doing here, exists for us to help you find that moment, right? I'm Rob Vest. This is episode 2 of Rebuild and Rise. I'll see you guys next week.